Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Lunar Display and Outcast. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good. We're doing I think probably, we ought to do a little housekeeping up front here. We're going to take a couple of weeks off. So this is going to be our final episode of 2018, and then we're going to take 2 weeks off and come back in the new year with a whole new set of topics and shows.
Yeah, I mean, every year we need a couple of weeks to recharge, to, spend time with our families, with our friends, and think about things we want to try in the new year, because I know that we always do this. It's, I think, especially for me, it's impossible to turn off this kind of processing in the background. It's always going on, the thinking about new ideas.
Right.
So the holidays are a great time to relax and enjoy spending time with family, but also to think about new problems, think about new ideas, and think about things we want to try and experiment with for the new year. But that's not all the team-related announcements that we have today, John. Because as you may see from the title of this episode, we launched something today on MacStories, and it's called MacStories Selects. And the idea with MacStories Selects is to pick our favorite apps and games of the year. And we see it as the first version of a much bigger plan that, if successful, I would like to build upon next year and in the coming years. But this year we wanted to start small, relatively small, and we wanted to start by having this complementary article, this complementary roundup to the articles that we also do for my must-have iOS apps and John's must-have Mac apps. And we wanted to have our favorite selections of the best new app of the year, so the best app debut of the year, the best app update of the year, so the app that received the best updated version over the course of 2018, but also the best iOS game of the year. And we call it the best, but it's really our favorite, the best according to the MacStories team, that is.
Right.
So we've been talking about this for the past month or so. We each came up with a list of our favorite picks for winners and for runners-up. We talked about our picks, we discussed them, we went through each of the categories and each of the nominees, if you will, and we basically just sat around the virtual table of Slack,
Right,
and we made a decision. And I think the result is a roundup that I think reflects the state of 2018 as far as the apps that we cover on MacStories are concerned. This is obviously a kind of end of the year roundup that is a reflection of the apps and the topics that we like to cover. So you may not see an ARKit app in this list because we don't cover those on MacStories. So these are MacStories Selects, 3 categories this year. Plus you will find my must-have iOS apps later this week. John's must-have Mac apps also later this week, I believe. And we're also going to talk about accessories at some point before the end of the year. We're going to start small. There's no physical awards this year, but I want to try them in the future. Who knows? And mostly, we want to hear from you. So in this episode of App Stories, we're going to discuss the article that you will find on MacStories for the winners and the runners-up for MacStories Selects 2018. But we want to hear from you. First of all, if you like the idea, but more importantly, I think, which categories do you want to see next year? Because the plan, as I said, is to do it again and to do it again bigger next time. So which categories do you feel like we should do? Is there anything missing? We would love to know what you think. What do you think, John? What do you think? This was a fun project to work on, I think.
It was a fun project, and it was interesting to me because the process was really a lot easier than I thought it would be. I mean, I think that we're all on kind of a similar wavelength, working together all year long, you, me, and Ryan, and it wasn't that hard for us to come up with a handful of apps in each category that we thought were worth considering. And then we reached a consensus about each category fairly quickly as well. And I just think that that's because every year when you look back at the apps we've covered, there are always a handful of standouts. And this year was really no different in that way. So It was a lot of fun to do, and I hope readers enjoy it. And yes, we'd definitely like to hear about other categories you think we should maybe try in the future. That would be really neat to hear from people about that. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Outcast, the best standalone podcast player for your Apple Watch. If you're listening to this show, you've got a podcast player, but chances are it's on your phone. It's not on your wrist. Did you know that there's a podcast player that lives solely on the Apple Watch? There is, and it's Outcast, the best way to discover, search, and browse podcasts straight from your Apple Watch. No iPhone required. Outcast does it all. Browse its directory of shows, download episodes over Wi-Fi or LTE, and play them back on the go. Best of all, you can leave your phone at home and still find new episodes to enjoy. Outcast also features real-time watch complications that show your progress directly on your watch face. Not many developers or users even know that this is possible, but it is, and Outcast has done it, which makes its complication one of the handiest podcast complications available from anyone. Complications also display full-color artwork when used with the Series 4 infograph faces, which look absolutely fantastic. Even though you don't need your phone, you can, of course, search for episodes at home on your phone if you'd like. Just pick what you want to listen to, and Outcast takes care of adding it to your watch. With a recent release, Outcast now supports chapters too, allowing you to quickly jump between sections of an episode. There's even support for playlists, which allow you to add and sort your playlist directly from your watch. Learn more about Outcast.app and give Outcast a try over the holidays. I think you'll love it. Our thanks to Outcast for its support of App Stories.
So, that said, again, you can go check out the article on MacStories, but in this episode, we're going to discuss the categories and the winners and the runners-up. There are no losers because in this roundup, everybody's a winner somehow.
Yes.
All right, so app debuts. This is obviously inspired by the app debuts regular column of MacStories Weekly for Club MacStories members, and the idea was we should take a look at new apps released in 2018 and decide which ones are the most remarkable, or the ones that grabbed our attention, the ones that we found the most useful. I'm gonna start with the first runner-up, John.
I feel like we should have a drum roll or something here, Federico.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe next year we'll have sound effects.
Maybe next year we'll have drummers.
Yeah, well, yes, we'll hire some freelance drummers to join the MacStories.
Can do that.
Yes.
First runner-up for me is Scriptable. We talked about this app back in September. It was a great help for me to put together the iOS 12 review. Scriptable is a JavaScript programming tool for iOS. It's a brand new app developed by indie developer Simon Stovring. I hope I got that right. And it's basically Pythonista for the modern age of iOS native features and for JavaScript instead of Python. With Scriptable, you can create JavaScript scripts in the app. They sync with iCloud between devices. It runs on the iPhone, runs on the iPad. But what sets it apart really is the integration between JavaScript and the rest of the system. What's really impressive about Scriptable is that not only can you write standard JavaScript, but you can also access these proprietary custom bridges that, as the name implies, they bridge native iOS functionality to JavaScript. So, for example, you can read and write to your reminders database from Scriptable. You can access photos from the photo library. You can access files from iCloud Drive. You can manage your contacts. You can open Safari View Controller. All of these native iOS features and frameworks, they are available inside Scriptable. And they allow you to do some crazy things that are not even supported by shortcuts or by the native apps themselves. For example, this year I needed to put together an automation that allowed me to move hundreds of screenshots for iOS 12 for my review from one folder to another in iCloud Drive, and in the process, change their tag, their associated tag. This is not possible with the Files app, of course, unless you want to waste a bunch of time doing that manually.
Right.
This is not possible with Shortcuts either, because the Shortcuts app does not have a native change tag or tag action for iCloud Drive. With Scriptable, you can write your own little program that takes files from one folder in iCloud Drive, moves them to another destination folder, and changes their metadata, including tags that are natively supported by iCloud Drive. It's an impressive app. It's super, if you know JavaScript, it's super easy to use. It's got syntax highlighting. It's got auto completion. It's really well done. And most impressive really is its deep integration with iOS APIs and frameworks. Really outstanding job with this first release in 2018. All right. Next up, Home Run. Another runner-up for my for my app debut of the year. Home Run is, I believe, one of the most useful apps that I have on the Apple Watch, but also one of the most clever takes on the HomeKit API. So Home Run allows you to quickly enable HomeKit scenes. And you may think, well, that's not a big deal because you got shortcuts, you got Siri. Why would you want to quickly trigger a scene? Home Run lets you trigger scenes from your wrist on the Apple Watch. And it's got two components. There's the main watch app that you can fully customize. You can create your own layout, your own grid of buttons with custom icons and custom colors that when you tap them, they enable a HomeKit scene. And you can control the layout of the grid, so you can make certain buttons bigger or smaller. You can change the colors, you can change the icons. But in the latest 1.1 version, which we covered on MacStories last week, Home Run lets you set up custom complications on any watch face for any Apple Watch, so that a scene, an individual HomeKit scene, can be a launcher on your watch face. So for example, I have a really nice HomeKit scene that turns all the lights in the bedroom blue, and that is now an icon on my watch face, so that when I tap it, the Home Run app for the Apple Watch launches, and it automatically enables the blue bedroom scene that I have. Home Run is a simple app, but it does something that is so useful that it's one of those apps that it's going to make you think, why hasn't Apple done this? It's so obvious. I cannot recommend Home Run enough if you're a heavy HomeKit person, if you have a bunch of accessories, a bunch of scenes, and if you also dislike the Home app on the watch as much as I do, you need to check out Home Run.
Yeah, it's a great app, and I've really enjoyed using it because I'm the same as you. I have a lot of different scenes set up, and using the Home app that Apple does, it's just not designed well for the watch because you have this long scrolling list of these cards where there's just a lot of wasted space. And with Home Run, you can cram a dozen buttons onto a watch face on the larger watch and quickly change scenes. And by the combination of custom icons and colors, it's very easy to quickly distinguish one from the other and tap it and set up your scene.
All right. Best app debut of the year, as decided by the MacStories team, Agenda. So
yes,
we discussed this for a long time. John was the first to review Agenda on MacStories back in January.
Yeah, it was late January. It's amazing how far this app has really come in the course of 12 months.
So Agenda launched on the Mac first. Your review was for the original Mac version. And the iOS counterpart launched in May, just before WWDC, I think.
Yep, that's right.
And Agenda has been improved a bunch of times over the year to the point where it was updated to version 4 just last week. I talked about it on MacStories with an article last week. I struggled for a long time to understand Agenda, to get what Agenda was really about. Because when you look at it, when you look at screenshots and if you look at a video, it doesn't immediately click for you. The idea of a note-taking app based around dates and scheduling. Scheduling notes is not something that you hear often in the note-taking app market. Why would you want to schedule a note, right?
No, you don't hear that very often. And I remember very clearly when I did that initial review, you asking me a lot of questions about exactly how it worked. And it was one of the hardest reviews to write during the year because it takes just a different perspective on note taking. And so I had to kind of deconstruct it and start from the very, very basics so that it was understandable in the review exactly what this app was doing and how it differed from other things out there. And it was kind of interesting, kind of starting from that at the beginning of the year to just last week when you were writing about it on iOS. there's been a lot of ground covered between those two updates.
Yeah. So the idea of agenda is that you write notes in the app and you can organize those notes with tags, with folders. They're called projects in this case. You can add attachments. As of the latest version of the app, you can include images and documents in your notes. And it supports iOS automation with X callback. It supports iPad keyboard shortcuts, iPad multitasking, Siri shortcuts. All the latest iOS features are supported. But what makes it unique is that it's not just notes, it's also calendar-based and scheduling notes. The idea of agenda is that if you're the type of person that works on projects by taking notes for everything, at some point, those notes will have to become actionable in some form. You will have to do something with those notes. So the idea behind agenda is that rather than taking your task manager and saying, do the thing that I wrote down in the notes on a specific day, you can make the note itself something that you will see in your calendar, something that you will see in the app that you already use to see what's coming up. An agenda leans into this idea with two specific views, the today view and the on the agenda view. And the idea would be in your daily work, you can make something as on the agenda, meaning it's the top level view. It's what you're working on right now. So it's easy to find and it's easy to bring up, for example, during a meeting or when you're on a Skype call, such as recording a podcast, for example. Or you can give it a specific day so that you can say this note, this research that I've been doing, I need to turn into something else on Tuesday. And optionally, you can create a calendar event for that note. And that calendar event will link back to agenda so that you can tap on the link and go straight into the note. And I really believe that agenda is a difficult app to understand. And this is why we discussed this for a while, also with you and Ryan. But ultimately, I think we wanted to award the fact that agenda tries something genuinely new and novel that is not a gimmick, that takes a while to understand, but that can find a really special place in any iOS user and Mac user's workflow. And I've never seen anything like it. The idea of scheduling notes is completely new to agenda. And we also wanted to celebrate this app because it was remarkable to see how quickly it went from a 1.0 in January to version 4 in December. And I mean, this app also won an Apple Design Award. I don't think that is a coincidence. And of course, a MacStories Selects is not as important as an Apple Design Award. I mean, maybe it's more important. Maybe they will be more important in the future. Who knows?
Who knows?
Anyway, we feel like Agenda is the best app debut that we covered on MacStories in 2018. So congrats to Agenda because it's really well deserved.
Yes, big congratulations to Agenda. It is a little hard to understand at first, but I know that, and I think part of that is the way you and I work, though, too, because I think I've heard from a lot of readers over the course of the year about how they use Agenda. And for people who spend a lot of time in meetings, especially, this has been a lifesaver. I mean, because it's really how their day is organized. Whether that's a good thing or not, a lot of people spend a lot of their day in meetings at their jobs, and organizing your notes and tasks and everything around those meetings and those time slots makes a lot of sense. And so I think a lot of people have really enjoyed this app, and I do think it is truly unique and innovative compared to most of the apps that we've looked at this year, and it's a well-deserved award. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by our friends at Luna Display. If you have a Mac and an iPad, listen up because there's something missing from your setup. This is big, and it's something that could change the way you interact with your devices. Something that you'll be excited to hear finally exists. And that thing is Luna Display. The good people at Luna have given us a little taste of the future, the ability to use iPads as a wireless display for your Mac. Yep, you heard me right. The iPad and Mac you already own working together. It's insanely useful. Just connect over Wi-Fi or USB, and just like that, you've got more screen real estate. This means you can even have multiple screens when you travel without having to lug around an extra monitor, because seriously, who wants to do that? I've been talking about Luna Display for quite a few weeks now, and I just wanted to remind everybody, I've been using a Luna Display since the very beginning when it was only a prototype, and this thing has worked like magic ever since I got one. I have a USB-C model that Luna Display sent me that I've been using with my MacBook Pro, and I've enjoyed it so much I bought a second one that's a mini DisplayPort model that I can connect to my headless Mac Mini. It's an older Mac Mini, so it doesn't have USB-C, but they also make a mini DisplayPort model, and it works like magic. Now, I don't have to go into screen sharing or anything like that. I've got a fast, immediate connection to my Mac Mini that I can use with my iPad. And when I have my keyboard connected to my iPad, it's just like I was using my Mac, but I've also got the benefit of being able to use my Apple Pencil. It's an amazing device. This is our last episode of 2018 for App Stories. So it's your last chance to jump on board and get a great deal on a Luna Display. You need to go to lunadisplay.com, and if you use the promo code AppStories at checkout, you can get 10% off. That's a fantastic deal. Again, that's lunadisplay.com and the promo code AppStories at checkout to get 10% off. Our thanks to Luna Display for their support of the show.
All right. Why don't you tell me about the category that you worked on, John? Games.
All right. So games. This to me was really the hardest category because every single year there are so many great games that come out on iOS, and we've played a lot of them. We haven't played every single one of them, but we've covered a lot of them. And this year we focused pretty quickly on a handful of games that really show off the qualities that are best on iOS devices for mobile gaming. Especially, we've got two. I'll start with the runner-up as you did, but in looking at these games and thinking about which deserved an award as a select, the things we thought about were, how do these games take advantage of the platform? I mean, there are a lot of games on iOS that are really just, cross-platform ports between things like Android and iOS, where they don't really necessarily feel like they belong on iOS. But the games that we've picked for this category do an excellent job of taking advantage of what's unique about iOS and what game developers can do on iOS. So to start off, I want to talk about our runner-up, which is Grim Valor, which is an incredibly great action game. I guess you would call this a Metroidvania type of game, wouldn't you, Federico?
It's somewhere in between a Metroidvania and a kind of lightweight Dark Souls type of game, with a very dark setting and the atmosphere and all that.
Yes, and this is a very deep game for a mobile game. There's a lot of content here. There's a lot of levels. You're basically exploring dungeons. It's very dark. Everything's lit with torches. The lighting is really great, and it's a hard game. It's very difficult to advance past some of these bosses. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and what I like too is that it takes advantage of things like the M5 controllers, because you can do everything with a controller here. And not a lot of games do that very well. I mean, including, navigating through the menus and doing all that. And then that makes it particularly nice if you're going to do something like what I tried, which was I took my iPad Pro and I hooked it up to my big 4K display and was able to play that way. And that was a lot of fun. It's a really fantastic game.
Yeah, I love playing Green Valor on the big display with my external controller. It's really well done. What's the winner, John?
All right. So the winner this year, and I think we spent a lot of time thinking about this because, as I said before, there were a lot of notable games this year. But the winner for this year for the MacStories Select is Alto's Odyssey. Alto's Odyssey, to me, took the original Alto's Adventure game and took it to an entirely different level. It basically perfected what Alto's Adventure promised in the first game, and everything about it was more polished, deeper. The gameplay is just absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful. It sounds good. It's a game that succeeds on every platform. It succeeds on everything from the smallest iPhone all the way up to the Apple TV, which I think most games don't do that very well. I mean, there are a lot of games, and that's when I was thinking about this, and I had some games I thought about for this category that were amazing on my iPhone, but you wouldn't want to play them on the Apple TV or on the iPad even, because they're the kind of games that are meant for quick play while you're in a line at a grocery store, for instance. And Alto's Odyssey, though, looks and sounds and plays great on all levels.
Yeah, and the reason why I ultimately agreed on Alto's Odyssey is that I feel like it's the game that I keep going back to on a regular basis. There are certain iOS games that I play for a period of time, and then when I'm done, they don't have that appeal on me anymore, whether because they don't have any replayability or just because I'm tired of the gameplay mechanic or whatever. But Alto's Odyssey, and this was true with Alto's Adventure as well, but it's even more true with Alto's Odyssey. It's a game that manages to be both relaxing and engaging and challenging at the same time. It's kind of like listening to a good song, but it's interactive in a way the music is not. So I can play Alto's Odyssey to relax, but it also occupies that part of my brain that requires interaction, that requires, facing a challenge. And it's, the Team Alto, of course, is aware of how people find their games relaxing. And that is why they feature a Zen mode in Alto's Adventure, and in Alto's Odyssey is unlocked by default in the first version of the game. It's beautiful. The music is amazing. All the work that the team has done with increasing the variety of the color palettes or the creatures that you will find in your descent in this desert, and all the achievements that you can unlock. It's so well done. There's so much more variety than in the first game. And like the first game, and even more so, it walks that line of peaceful relaxation but challenging gameplay that is so well done and so unique and so tastefully realized in a sequel that doesn't feel like a sequel, even though it is, that we all felt that it deserved to be the game of the year for the MacStories team.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. App updates. So this was a fun one in that some app updates are minor and some of them are big, and this is obvious. But there's also the case where some app updates could be considered new apps, entirely new apps.
Right.
As was the case with one of the picks in our runners-up that we discussed, and we eventually realized that it was not an app debut, but it was an app update, even though it changes so much. Anyway, I will start with Overcast 5. It's our first runner-up for app update of the year. Marco Arment did an excellent job updating Overcast for iOS 12. I'm especially a fan of the new Now Playing screen that uses swipeable cards in a more tasteful and useful and practical way. But I'm especially a fan of the shortcut integration, so that you can resume Overcast via Siri using your voice and a shortcut, but you can also resume any playlist or any specific podcast that you're subscribed to. Really an excellent update. Looks so much better than Now Playing screen than the old version. And the shortcut integration means I've been able to create custom shortcuts in the Shortcuts app using the native Overcast actions. And also, the audio plays back on the HomePod via AirPlay 1. Overcast 5 still doesn't support AirPlay 2, but I know Marco is working on it. So Overcast 5, I use this app many, many hours every week, and it deserves to be included in the app updates of the year.
Yeah, I agree. This is an update that changed the way I use Overcast more than any of the other recent updates, in that I find it much easier to use the Now Playing screen. I'm more likely to swipe between the cards to look at chapters or show notes or whatever it is. And as you said, the Siri shortcut stuff is just amazing to be able to put together custom shortcuts that do things in Overcast. I've really enjoyed that one a lot.
All right. The app that I mentioned, we debated whether it was a new one or an app update, is Drafts 5. Drafts 5 was so big of an update that could be considered an app debut, but it's also an evolution of the previous Drafts 4 in many considered substantial ways. So we ultimately decided that even though I think it's a new app on the store, it's a new purchase.
Right.
It's a free download with a subscription, so it's a new separate version of Drafts on the App Store. It still builds upon the previous Drafts, and so we consider Drafts 5 an app update, and one of the best ones that we covered this year. Drafts 5 was the app that I wrote my iOS 12 review in. And in many ways, I consider this app to be the spiritual successor to Editorial, the text editor that I used to have until last year on all of my devices because of its own workflow actions, its own automation for Markdown. Drafts, thanks to its built-in actions and support for JavaScript and support for advanced actions that blend visual steps with code, is the new Editorial for me. Drafts can be used as a note-taking app as always, and the new version has excellent features for that kind of usage. There's workspaces to organize your notes in different projects. There's support for new syntaxes such as multi-markdown or even GitHub flavored markdown. There is an overhauled appearance menu. There's a new way to organize your actions in the extra keyboard row. But really, if you want to use Drafts as a text editor, I think the changes in Drafts 5 with the new JavaScript engine and the regular updates and the new workspaces features and the new keyboard features, they really transform this app into a powerful text editor that is inching closer and closer to the power of BB-Edit on the Mac, for example. And I'm pretty sure that with time, we'll get to the point where Drafts 5 can be just as powerful as BB-Edit, but on iOS. It could be considered a new app, but it builds upon Drafts 4 while enhancing the old version in many powerful ways, and for that reason, we consider Drafts 5 to be among the best app updates of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, what I think is most powerful about Drafts 5 is its flexibility, because you can really make it work the way you work, which is really kind of remarkable because so many different text editors are opinionated and want you to work the way they want you to work. Whereas Drafts 5, you can really make it your very own. And I've used it a lot I don't write in it regularly, but I have used it more and more often with the workspaces feature to organize template text that I use in a bunch of different places week to week, and then using it that way. And it's been great.
All right, why don't you tell me about the third runner-up for Best App Update?
Okay, so the third runner-up is Obscura 2, and you and I just covered this recently in our photography episode, so I won't belabor it too much, but Obscura 2 was a very big update. It really took the app, I think, to a more polished and professional level. I really enjoy more than anything else the UI and some of the way the controls work, the way everything is based on a dial metaphor, which is familiar to people who have used physical, dedicated actual real cameras, and also does a great job by using that dial motif to organize what is a very deep feature set and a lot of things that can be adjusted. It just makes it easy to find those things and also easy to adjust them at the same time.
The best app update of the year, according to the MacStories team, is Things 3.6. We specifically wanted to celebrate this update because of the message that it sends to the developer community, but most importantly to Apple. Things 3.6 was the external keyboard update for Things. It enabled full-featured external keyboard control and keyboard navigation, not just keyboard shortcuts in Things for iPad, but complete navigation of the iPad version of Things from the keyboard. And when I reviewed Things 3.6 at the time, I was still using Things as my main task manager. I'm not anymore, but I still recognize the quality of the work that Culture Code put into that update. You can completely control the app from a smart keyboard or any external keyboard on the iPad. You can switch between views, but you can also select individual items. You can expand them. You can open pop-up windows and close them without ever touching the screen. You can perform actions on selected tasks. You can batch select multiple tasks and perform actions on them. You can do anything you can do with touch, you can do with the keyboard.
You can even do search, which is
Yes.
really nice.
Yeah, you can search, you can select results, you can open them, you can go back to search. It's really impressive and remarkable. And I think this update shows the way for third-party developers to consider the external keyboard API on iOS and on iPad, but it also shows how behind Apple's own apps are when it comes to treating the smart keyboard that Apple itself makes and external keyboards in general as a primary input system for the iPad Pro. The same company that makes the iPad also makes the keyboard, but doesn't treat the keyboard as a primary input system. There's something wrong with that, I think. And Things is an example that other apps should follow, that Apple itself should follow. Things had many updates this year, version 3.7 with Siri shortcuts, version 3.8 last week with dark mode on iOS, and those were impressive, but 3.6 and the keyboard update is the one that keeps coming up in our discussions about iPad productivity and iPad Pro with the keyboard, and it's the one of the most remarkable integrations with external keyboards that I've seen on iOS. And I hope that in the future, maybe iOS 13, maybe something else, I don't know. But I hope that Apple down the road will be inspired by this update to enable this kind of keyboard control on iOS.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the winner clearly because it makes working with this app so much easier. It's so powerful to be able to do every single thing with a keyboard shortcut of some sort. And I wish every single app had this kind of control that Things does. And you're right. I mean, Apple's apps, some of them have keyboard shortcuts, but it's very inconsistent from app to app. And I think Apple needs to, in this situation, lead the way a little bit and maybe adopt more keyboard shortcuts for their primary apps, their productivity apps, to help encourage developers to do something a little more along the lines of things. I mean, this is clearly the best update that we've had this year. And we talked about it. As you said, it really comes down to productivity and making the most of the iPad, and Things did a great job this year. All right, Federico. Well, that was a lot of fun. I mean, this is our inaugural year, as we said at the outset.
It's, as Jason Snell would say, it's the first annual MacStories Selects.
Yes, it is the first annual MacStories Selects. Hope you enjoyed it, and go over to MacStories.net to read all about the selects in a little more detail. I want to thank our sponsors again for this week, both the Luna Display and Outcast. And you can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. And over on Twitter, Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.